Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today is Poetry Thursday, and as part of my observation of Pride Month, I'm going to be talking today about poet, essayist, and political activist Audre Lorde. Lorde, a black woman and a lesbian, was a prominent figure in both the women's and the LGBTQ rights movements in the 20th century. Additionally, as someone who lived with cancer for 15 years, she was also a vocal spokeswoman for cancer survivors. Lorde was born in Harlem, New York in 1934 to immigrant parents from Grenada. She began writing poetry at a very young age. By the time she was in high school, she was the editor-in-chief of her literary magazine. I recently saw a video in which she talked about her very early experiences of writing poetry. She talked about how, as an adolescent, she had written a sonnet, and she showed it to her teacher, who told her that it wasn't a very good sonnet. Well, Audre Lorde was undaunted, and she, instead of, being upset or insulted or discouraged about writing, she took her sonnet and she submitted it to 17 magazine. Well, the magazine not only published her poem, but they also paid her a generous sum for being allowed to, in order to be allowed to publish it. And she said in this video that I was watching that it would be the most money that she would make writing poetry for a very long time. Lorde earned her bachelor's degree from Hunter College in New York, and she earned a master's degree in library science at Columbia University. She worked as a school librarian in the New York City public schools. In 1962, knowing that she was a lesbian, she married Edwin Rollins, who was a white man, an attorney, and also a man who knew that he was gay. And they made a decision to marry, and they had 2 children. They had a son and a daughter, and they stayed together for 8 years, and then they went their separate ways. Audre Lorde would go on to meet the woman who would become her partner for most of the rest of her life. While she was serving as writer-in-residence at Tougaloo College in Mississippi. Here she met psychology professor Frances Clayton, and they lived openly as a lesbian couple for over 20 years with their families. Throughout her career, Lorde wrote about race, gender, sexual identity, class, and disease and illness, and living with long-term illness. She published over 18 books in her lifetime, including many volumes of poetry and several collections of essays, speeches, and letters. I have a number of her books. First, the poetry books of hers that I have Chosen Poems, Old and New. I have Undersong, Chosen Poems, Old and New, Revised. I have also the Black Unicorn poems, and a couple of her works of non-fiction, non-poetry. This is a collection of essays, A Burst of Light. And I also have her correspondence with the poet Pat Parker. This is called Sister Love, The Letters of Audre Lorde and Pat Parker, 1974 to 1989. Lorde was a professor of English at John Jay College and also at Hunter College, both in New York. She was first diagnosed with breast cancer in 1977, and she wrote powerfully about her experiences fighting breast cancer. Finding the disease and its treatments shrouded in silence, especially among Black women, she wrote the Cancer Journals in 1980 in the hopes of helping women facing the same struggles that she had faced. The book was given the American Library Association's Gay Caucus Book of the Year Award in 1981, and it remains to this day a classic in the genre of illness narrative. Lorde battled metastatic breast cancer for 15 years, and she passed away in 1992 when the cancer had spread to her liver, and she was only 58 years old. She was the poet laureate of the state of New York at the time of her death. Her legacy is filled with honors and distinctions, including the following. There's a community health center named for her and for Michael Callan, which is dedicated to providing medical health care to the LGBTQ population of New York City without regard to one's ability to pay. The Audre Lorde Project in Brooklyn is a community organization concentrating on non-violent activism around progressive issues in New York City relating to the LGBTQ communities, including AIDS and HIV activism, pro-immigrant activism, prison reform, and organizing among youth of color. Lorde was also inducted posthumously to the National LGBTQ Wall of Honor within the Stonewall National Monument in New York's Stonewall Inn, the first U.S. national monument dedicated to LGBTQ rights and history. Lorde's house on Staten Island, New York, has also been designated a landmark in the New York City Landmarks Preservation, or by the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. In March of 2019, the women of the U.S. women's national soccer team each wore a jersey with the name of a woman that they wanted to honor. Megan Rapinoe wore the name of Audre Lorde on her jersey. A street by Hunter College has also been renamed Audre Lorde Way. Before I share a few of her poems, I want to read an excerpt from a famous essay that she penned in 1985 entitled "Poetry is Not a Luxury." And this essay, it appears in many places now, but it was originally published in her collection, Sister Outsider. In this essay, Lorde sets up the position that women contain within ancient and hidden sources of power, creativity, and feeling. She sees a recognition of these sources of power as the key to survival. She goes on to say that poetry is, quote, the revelation or distillation of experience, not sterile wordplay. She writes, quote, for women, then, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes, and dreams toward survival and change. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. The farthest external horizons of our hopes and fears are cobbled by our poems, carved from the rock experiences of our daily lives. As they become known and accepted to ourselves, our feelings and the honest exploration of them become sanctuaries and fortresses and spawning grounds for the most radical and daring of ideas. And now for a few of her poems. First, who said it was simple? There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in Nedics, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hire to make them free. An almost white counterman passes, a waiting brother, to serve them first. And the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by my mirror as well as my bed, see causes in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering which me will survive all these liberations. Next, a trip on the Staten Island Ferry. Dear Jono, there are pigeons who nest on the Staten Island Ferry and raise their young between the moving decks and never touch a shore. Every voyage is a journey. Cherish this city left you by default. Include it in your daydreams. There are still secrets in the streets even I have not discovered. Who knows if the old men shining shoes on the Staten Island Ferry carry their world in that box slung across their shoulders? If they share their lunch with the birds flying back and forth on an endless journey, if they ever find their way back home. Sister, mourning is a time for miracles. A core of the conversations we never had lies in the distance between your wants and mine, a piece of each buried beneath the wall that separates our sameness, a talisman of birth hidden at the root of your mother's spirit, my mother's furies. Now, reaching for you with my sad words between sleeping and waking, a runic stone speaks. What is asked for is often destroyed by the very words that seek it, like dew in the early morning, dissolving the tongue of salt, as well as its thirst. And I call you secret names of praise and fire that sound like your birthright, but are not the names of a friend. while you hide from me under 100 excuses lying like tombstones along the road between your house and mine. I could accept any blame I understood, but picking over the fresh and possible loneliness of this too early morning, I find the relics of my history fossilized into a prison where I learn to make love forever better than how to make friends, where you are encased like a half-stoned peach in the rigid art of your healing. And in case you have ever tried to reach me and I couldn't hear you, these words are in place of the dead air still between us. A memorial to conversations we won't be having, to laughter shared and important as the shelves we helped make real, but also to the dead revelations we buried stillborn in the refuse of fear and silence, and your remembered eyes which don't meet mine anymore. I never intended to let you slip through my fingers, nor to purchase your interest ever again, like the desire of a whore who yawns behind her upturned hand, pretending a sigh of pleasure. And I have had that too already. Once I thought when I opened my eyes we would move into a freer and more open country where the sun could illuminate our different desires and the fresh air do us honor for who we were. Yet I have awakened at 4 a.m. with a ribald joke to tell you, and found I had lost the name of the street where you hid under an assumed name, and I knew I would have to bleed again in order to find you. But just once, in the possibilities of this too early morning, I wanted you to talk, not as a healer, but as a lonely woman talking to a friend. And finally, a litany for survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward at once, before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard, not welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. So that's just a little bit about the late, great poet Audre Lorde. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.